Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crossy's Corner. And with me today, one of the world's most amazing coaches, Paul Thompson, Australia's current performance director. Welcome to Crossy's Corner, Paul.
Thanks very much, Martin. And good day to you.
Been dying to chat with you actually for quite a while, and because you've had such an amazing experience in the sport. Could I just ask you, just to get us rolling, what's the day been like today? How typical has that been of a performance director's job?
Yeah, well, every day is different, which is one of the appealing factors. It did start with trying to look after yourself by going for a bit of a jog, but look, today's been talking with coaches, meeting with rowers. We've been redesigning the website, meeting with the Olympic Committee about accreditations, and
oh wow,
yeah. So it's been pretty diverse, and that's all been a build up for Crossy to where we are now at 8 p.m. talking to you.
That's really interesting. I just wonder, obviously. You experienced when you were in Britain as women and lightweights chief coach, you were working with David Tanner, who was performance director. How much is that a model for you now?
Look, that's a really good question, and David's absolutely outstanding in what he did, and he brought his character to the team, and he was a real driver in that, and I still keep in touch with him, to be fair. But there's a few things there. You come up and you see a situation and you reflect back on how David handled it and what sort of advice he'd give, and he was always very good at giving advice, giving guidance, but then when you knew there was a bit of direction involved, as you would have known from being under him as a rower.
Yeah, Mark. Yeah. I guess I know there's Olympic trials at the weekend. What does that mean in terms of trials? Are crews being put into small boats and raced against each other, or is there some other? Are they racing in boat types? What's the weekend looking like?
Very good question, Crossy. So like most nations, we'll be working, a selection over a period. It's a journey, not just an end point. And so we've already had a series of long distance trials, and we've 2 weeks ago was the New South Wales Championships in Penrith, and we used them as the final point for people to join the squad and get invited to the March trial. So, yeah, in essence, that's ergo testing, small boat testing, as you say, singles and pairs, and then moving into crew formation and crew testing, and then finish off at the end of the week with the team assessment.
You had some fast fours in those New South Wales Championships.
Yes, we did. Well spotted. Look, we're still forming. We know at last year's World Championships, we feel we've got more potential than was displayed there. Obviously the coaches and athletes have come back and thought about that long and hard. And so, we will be forming what those crew priorities will be, because we need to follow the speed during the coming 2 weeks.
Oh, right. So you don't have in your mind, like, okay, this is the set boat, the top boat for the men, most likely, or this is the key boat for the women. I'm making this up. So, Jess and Annabelle in the women's pair, you say, okay, that's probably going to be the top boat. And then in the men, maybe the men's 8, but I don't know with the speedos. How much of an idea do you have going into?
Yeah, of course. Good question. And Jess and Annabelle, an outstanding combination, as the Dutch were at the World Championships last year. So there's a few natural fits with the boats. So that priority of selection comes in, and it's been we've worked to those priorities, and the 2 8s have medalled, and the 2 4s didn't, and the 2 4s were selected before the 8s last year. So that's opened opened us up to being able to be looking. So so we are definitely on the men's side trying to build that momentum with the 8, but we're also feel we've got 2 boats in there that we're looking to develop out of that pair and 4.
Yeah. It's interesting. The Sinkovics obviously have switched from racing in the men's double after they were defeated by the Netherlands into the men's pair. And I know Road 2K had a bit of analysis out today about the World Championship times. And if you look at the times, that the pair seems to be a boat that's on the slower side of gold medal winning time. How much do things like that influence you?
They're always a consideration, but you still need to work to your strengths, and you just can't be too greedy or too smart by half with these things either. So, I always feel that you need to work to your strengths, and of course, it's a consideration when you're going into the boats if you've got a line ball there, but fundamentally you still need to be fast first, and if you want to be great, you've got to beat great. So it's about making sure you're getting the most out of the people that you've got. But of course, that's a consideration if you're in that luxurious opportunity situation to be able to choose.
Yeah. But you're not likely to prioritise the men's pair, I'm guessing, just because they might have had a relatively slower gold medal time.
Not for that reason alone. No, we'd prioritise the pair if we've got a scintillating pair.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't understand, and you must have struggled to understand, was the progress of the men's 4, the Olympic champions last season. I think maybe their best race was the first time they raced the British in Varese. Which was interesting, seeing the 2 different styles together, and we can maybe talk about that. And then obviously, going to Lucerne with a much lower rate than they seem to race in Varese, and then come into the Worlds and crew changes in the middle of the World Championships. I think Purnell and Hill switched. And they qualified, fair dues. But I mean, obviously, that's one of your underperforming boats. What can you tell us about what was going on with them and why that happened?
Yeah, look, I was thinking today, the first time you interviewed me, Mark, we was at one of those team announcements in GB, and we're all sitting around there with television cameras and all you guys there, and I think you asked me a pretty sharp question like that, and I gave a pretty waffly answer. And you said, "Well, you're the head coach, Paul. You should know." So that's stuck with me. Look, as far as the 4 go, they're excellent guys. There's no 2 ways about it. And we didn't get it right for them, or them get it right either. They had really high expectations, and coming into Varese, they obviously would then put themselves under more pressure to where their expectations were. We'd known from Rudnitze that we needed to improve the distance per stroke. So they were trying to find that, and so then that moved from one regatta to the next, and they were searching for a feeling in the training. And for commitment to the cause, they were really good. Last year's Worlds had a longer gap between Lucerne and the World Championships, which gave them an opportunity, and they buried themselves really deep in the training in Italy as well, and they'd tried the different combinations, as you said, with Purnell coming into the stroke seat and Hilly into the bow seat, which worked at the lower rates, but when they got into side by side in the racing, they felt they wanted to go back to what they knew, which is what you saw play out at the World Championships. So so obviously there's been a bit of soul searching, go through that, and it was an uncomfortable experience for them. And most of us have been in crews that haven't quite achieved what they to achieve, and it's taken a while to come back and look forward. But they're outstanding guys, and they're amongst the best guys that we've got, and they'll be featuring in our top crew and cruise.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Paul. One thing that struck me is the way the 8 rode, the men's 8, with Mark Prater coaching them, which I would say was, technically at a very high level. And I'd say the 4 were sort of rowing in a different style, or fairly individualistic style. Is that something that you see, or am I just off with that?
No, you're not off at all. And Mark's done a wonderful job with the 8, and they've got a great rhythm when they're at their best. And what it's like winning an Olympic gold medal at Crossy, and it's the winning after winning, and you've done what you've done to be fast, and so you anchor your confidence in a lot of that, and you've got a lot of belief in it, and so they were quite wedded in what they knew and what they were looking for. However, it ended up coming apart rather than together.
Yeah. I can see that with the women. I was talking with Colin Smith, who I think and it was about the future of rowing. And he happened to put forward an opinion that maybe with the medal in the women's 8, this could be the year to put all the eggs in the women's 8 basket. How do you make? What's your view on that, and how do you make those sort of decisions?
Yeah, look, we follow the speed. And so obviously, as you saw, there was 4s racing at New South Wales Championships, and so the selectors will take that into account, and we'll run the 8s out, and we'll be putting our fastest boats forward, whether that's the 4 or the 8. But obviously, we've got some great rowers in those 2 8s that have come up, so we need to be respectful of their performance last year as well. And so there's 2 really competitive sweep groups with the same problems. So you're probably asking me these questions about 10 days. 10 days too early, to be fair. So so we want to work through that in a methodical way.
Yeah. How's Tara going in the women's single?
She's brilliant.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah, and what a great backstory Tara's got. I don't know whether you've had her on, but she was started off rowing, and she was a netballer and got 2 knee injuries. And then Alfie Young, good Irish coach, went and said, well, how about getting back in the water? And she's great. She's just got such a great feel for the boat. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you have? I know in sort of we talked about David Tanner, the British performance director. They had medal targets, which include, maybe, I don't know, would it have been, which David was very good at negotiating down. So rather than like 3 gold medals or whatever, it would be like 2 gold medals. So you could overachieve. What's the target for you guys for Paris?
Well, like with all of those, and the same with David and the GB, your internal targets are always higher than what the external targets are. But Australia finished second on the table to New Zealand in Tokyo with 4 medals, and 2 gold and 2 bronze. So that's a really good starting place for us, and that's where we'd like to go, and we'd like to stretch past that. I'm sure you've done your numbers. We've qualified 9 boats for the Olympics and 3 boats for the Paras. We were the 3rd highest in behind the Romanians and Brits in numbers of rowers qualified.
Yeah.
And we had 23 medalists last year, obviously helped by the 2 8s. So we've got the base level is really, really strong, and we're seeing that in our trialling. The competition for seats is really, really high, and we've got 5 medals last year. So 5 medals in 22, 4 medals in 23. So we're around that track, but it's the Olympics, and
Yeah. This is kind of a bit of a stupid question before I answer it, but in terms of, let's say, aiming for gold medals, what do you think about the possibility, say, of an Australian 8 challenging Britain and Netherlands for gold, or an Australian 4 challenging the British 4 and the Americans for gold, or indeed the women's pair, Jess and Annabelle, getting in front of the Dutch pair, Meester and Kreveling, for gold?
Yeah, well, that's what you've just outlined is our absolute aims. But we know we're playing a bit of catch up there as well. So look, with the men's 8, of course, we're buoyed. Lucerne was on our side of the ledger, and the guys were great there. And then we got the bronze, and the Dutch and the Brits got over the top of us. And so that's certainly what our aspirations are anyway, and we want to make sure we're putting our best foot forward to do that. Of course, being close there, and Paul Stannard leads a really strong men's program there, as we've seen how strong the Dutch are. So I think we saw that Tokyo was a marathon with the 5 years, and Paris is a real sprint. And sense of urgency, and who's going to get there is really at the forefront of our minds.
Yeah. Sometimes we get listeners or viewers putting questions in. Here's one from Vegan Juby Athlete. Thank you for watching, and it's quite a broad question, I guess. Very respectful, Mr. Thompson there. How do you maintain such high levels of coaching consistency over so many years? So I think your first world gold medal was in '95, was it?
Yeah, that's right, with Slater and Still.
Yeah.
Women's pair, and they went on and won in Atlanta. Well, I guess first is you need to be able to manage yourself, and that takes a little while to learn as well. And you need to find out what's important. And then I think, as you develop as a coach, you probably find different ways how to shortcut problems, so that you can really concentrate on what the key things are. And that's so looking after yourself, and keeping the motivation to be able to get down there. Like I'm always so respectful and privileged to be able to share journeys with such fabulous athletes. And just seeing, the real privileges in seeing them work every day, and at the quality of what they do. And when you get some of the top crews like you're mentioning, there's real pressure and excitement to be challenging them in the right way and supporting them in the right way to get to where they, to release their potential, because that's all you can do. And if you're good enough, you release the potential, the speed that's in the boat, and that's in amongst the medals.
I know great coaches are always learning. And this may be a difficult question, but if you could think of 2 or 3 key learning points over your time as a coach, whether it was results not going your way, or whether it was a win or something, or what would you point to, and why would they be important?
Yeah, I think it's also the evolution of the coach, and and connecting with young people. Is pretty key, and sometimes you do that better than others. And I reflect on my own coaching career and go, okay, what have I done things differently now? Of course, because you often move, and it's like with coaching course, you move into the technical side, and you get to establish that, and that'll take you so far. But then you realize it's more and more about the relationships and the people.
Yeah,
and getting the most out of the people. And on reflecting back, you can just do it in so many different ways. And seeing the the Chinese program work, and we're sitting down and we get called in and say, okay, look, Olympics has been delayed, but their 7-week military training in the Olympic year is not going to be delayed. So, off they go for 7 weeks, no training at all. Great time for us to have a little bit of a holiday in the Olympic year, but we're still winning medals with those athletes. Now, would you write that into an Olympic program? Absolutely not. So, you just learn different things on the way through about, what's critical, what's a crisis and what isn't a crisis, and what's important and what isn't important. So there's a whole bunch of stuff around that to come back to, which in essence is look after your people and make sure the main thing is the main thing, the important thing is the important thing, and focus in on that.
Yeah. That's fascinating, Paul. You mentioned the China journey. You don't have to respond to this because I don't know what you can say. I kind of thought it was crazy from the outside, the GB squad losing the two most incredible chief coaches, yourself and Paul Jurgen Grobler. What can you say about that time? Because I don't imagine it was particularly happy. But you might not want to say anything, Paul.
No, that's fine. Look, it was a particularly challenging time, as it was for Jurgen as well. We had a couple of beers at the Worlds and a few since then, discussing that to be fair. And I think one of the pieces, just like with the rower, resilience is really important as being part of your DNA and character, and how you deal with setbacks and things going different ways. And that and that clearly happened at the end. Didn't quite finish the way I would have liked it to have finished. There's no two ways about that. But it also created other opportunities. And I don't mind sharing this, but I'd sort of said my farewells down at Caversham, and I was literally driving down our road, just pulling in, and I get a phone call from Steve Redgrave going, "Listen, Tomo, what do you think about China?" And I was like, "Oh, Steve, can you just give me a chance to catch my breath, and I'll get back to you." And there's always a few opportunities out there, and that was I really valued my time in China. Uncomfortable, and there's been a couple of years out of that now. But yeah, working with Steve was fabulous, and working in such a different culture and such a different space really challenged me in a good way, especially like coaching in a foreign language. And I totally recommend that opportunity to anyone. So we were really lucky. We had fabulous translators that would help, and we'd use my rustic Mandarin, which I could get them to accelerate the boat and push the legs faster and order a beer, but to the train station, forget about it. But you really had to set out your session. You had to be absolutely crystal clear, so you could write that out. So there was real clarity. We do it in English and Mandarin. If you wanted to change anything, you'd show them before they went out on the water. Then you go out and you just have to concentrate on the big ticket items, on the main things, because you just can't go in. And I had a mate who was a skeleton coach in GB, gold medal with Amy Williams, was it?
Yeah.
And he was over in China, and he used to get them to draw. So to draw out the technique. So you had to come up with different ways to be able to connect and teach the rowers. So that's what we're doing out there. And then, to be fair, when I first came out here and was going out with coaches in native tongues, it was like I really had trouble finding where the key message was, because you can talk about the little finger, you can you can fill out with lots and lots of words, but I was really not adding too much to the athlete on what's the key thing, are you doing it better, and giving them some really, really critical feedback there. So in terms of the reflection side, that was a really, really interesting piece for me.
Oh, wow. I kind of want to talk about that in a sense, because I think one of the most haunting images of, let's say, medalists on the medal rostrum was in 2008 in Beijing with the women's quad that you coached, led by Catherine Granger, who were leading and then got rode through by the Chinese, who won the gold. And they were obviously distraught on the medal podium. And I, without too much knowledge, looked at the race and said, well, okay, so that's similar to what happened in Lucerne. So why did you go out to do the same thing? Why not try and do something different? So what's your analysis now looking back? Because it's obviously a few years to that race. What was your own reaction to it? And
yeah, look, that's a really good point. And if I could just start with a little story a few years after 2008, because when I got picked up at the airport in Shanghai, and I was going to the training center in Hangzhou. And so you've got your Chinese coach and the driver, and the driver's going along, and he reminded me about that 2008 race. And then he proudly told me how his wife was in the crew. So he'd obviously bottled that up for a while. Yeah, look, there's a context to that one again, because we'd won the quad in 2005. There was a real journey, that Olympiad, which was big for the British women. Catherine Boren was in the German crew, and we got over the top of them. And then in 2006, it was a similar pattern, and the Russians got in front, just coming in Dorney, and then they were scrubbed through anti-doping violation.
Yeah.
So they're on top. And then in 2007, and the crew had a couple of changes on the way through. In 2007, they just stomped it, and that was one of my proudest moments, and just showed them as a crew. Catherine had done a back-in after Lucerne.
Yeah.
And so we were rowing around as a triple, and so Anna Watkins and Elise in the pair, and they were good for a medal as well. So we didn't want to mess them up, and it's all the qualification period. So so for a long time in the training camp, we had a 20 kilo weight at the front of the bow, keeping it level, throwing in a triple. So it was a really creative way to be able to get there.
Yeah.
And that was another one, because I don't know if you recall, Annie Vernon was in the stroke seat in the heats, and then Kat came into the stroke seat in the final, because we couldn't do any racing starts up to the regatta. So Anne Redgrave was quite she's a fabulous doctor. She was quite straight. You'll get one crack at this. Don't mess it up.
Yeah.
So in the final there, they just took off and just led completely from start to finish, and had cleared out from the field quite early on. So that racing strategy was quite in their DNA.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as if we didn't try different things, but it didn't work out. And for all the expectations, that they were devastated, and so was I. I guess moving into the next phase is I really had to look at myself, because I didn't really put it down to the rowing. I put it more down to the how they were rowing rather than the training, rather. And just getting more efficiency and length, and be able to move through. So that was definitely something we took into the next Olympiad. But again, there was a lot of soul searching around that result as well. So that's where that came into it. And I'll share another story. But Granger and Watkins don't mind, but we were sitting around in the team hotel before the final in 2012, where again, 3 seasons undefeated, coming into the Olympic final, and we're going through what's going to happen the next day, all the rest of it. And hats off to Anna. She said, "Look, I just want to say, if we blow up with 250 meters to go," clearly referencing back to the quad in 2008, "just keep moving." To which Catherine maybe stiffened up a little bit and assured her that there would be no problem. Tomorrow. So it had an effect across the squads. And I don't know if you recall that it was a great race, to be fair, by the Swindells in 2008.
Yeah, I do. They only led in the last stroke.
Yeah, and Elise Laverick and Anna Bevington, as she was then, Watkins, was coming right back on the finish there. So for the women's team, we had those 2 results that could have gone either way and didn't. So we really had to come back from that. And then it's not me, it's the athletes. But then we came away with London with three gold medals in the women's team, which was a great result for them, and 2 medals in the lightweight men as well.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, Paul. Just sticking with the Chinese, their women's quad last year at the World Championships. I mean, clearly, they were well behind the British and the Dutch out in front for gold and silver. What do you know about their performance, and do you think they'll be back? I think they've had some coaching changes. I don't know whether their female coach has been sort of sidelined or pushed out of coaching. I was hearing something about that, but how did you see that?
Yeah, look, that's really China's a fascinating. I'll start with broad and then go.
Yeah.
Because I know you tried to get me on here in 2021, and we got vetoed by the Chinese Olympic Committee. So now it's fair game. Look, what happened there was really an experiment where they brought rowing and canoeing outside of the sports department.
Yeah.
And tried to make it self-funding. So, and this was led by Dr. Liu. So we had a green room in the gym, pumping out social media content every day from the rowing team. We had a live to air. It was billed as the first sporting competition coming out of COVID, where we had throughout China an indoor rowing competition based on like an Ironman principle.
Yeah.
So we had Zhang Liang, the stroke of the double, do 42 Ks. And then there was 42 people came and challenged him for a kilometre each on an ergo next week. Then 3 of the women were going for a world record in the half marathon. And I mean, look, Zhang Liang did 139.6 for 42K. He's
whoa,
exceptional athlete. And then rolled 2K ergos around that. And when you have pre and post and pull it all together, it was really a great advertisement for our sport. And in China, the clubs are a bit more like golf clubs. So we went to one in Hangzhou, and it was in the basement of a shopping centre. You'll have a businessman own a few clubs, and that's a lot more recreational than the performance, and that's in the traditional. Provincial, they've got an Olympic team size each and racing for the national team. So there's still a bit of a throwback to there. So it was really quite, and they developed a whole gymnasium. So the rowing team and canoeing team would do testing for other sports. We had the cyclists in, so it was like a mini institute. Cyclists and swimmers came in for camps. And then they developed these series, it was called Physical Health and Development gymnasiums, that they ended up having one near the Bird's Nest, which was for the general public to come in. some really quite creative stuff.
Yeah.
And that was led by Dr. Liu, who you probably know. So it was, I used to tell them that the best capitalist is a communist, because they're quite savvy at building those. But the sports minister changed, and there are a few other changes. So they've had a structural change and come back within the sports department. The sports department now. So they've had lots of internal changes, which I think you're seeing rolling out. However, those athletes in the women's sculling team, they're exceptional, and I'm sure they'll be on the money. And Tom Kay's over there, they're leading. And he's done a fabulous. He will do a fabulous job with them to get them back on the straight and narrow.
Oh, that's magic. We've got another question from our GB athlete, which is a kind of broad question, I guess. How do you approach training and preparation differently for athletes aiming for Olympic success compared to those at low level? I guess your experience is mainly with Olympic athletes, so I don't know how you are in terms of dealing with that question.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, and even though we're looking for Olympic athletes, they come, often a rower's talent will be ahead of their training base and their training years. So in essence, you have to be weighing up what their goals are, and then what their individual levels are, so that you're coaching the person. So that's pretty essential, whatever coaching that you're doing. So if you want to be an Olympic athlete, you're going to have to do 200k a week, and you're going to have to do all the things that come along with that. The thing that hasn't changed is the requirements of a 2,000 meter race. So ever since God invented 2,000 meter racing about 200 years ago, you face backwards, you go into oxygen debt. That's not going to be repaid till you cross the finish line. Your lactates might go up to 12, 13, 14. If you're in emergency medicine and someone's having a heart attack, they're pretty much gone after 3. And then the lead might change 6 or 7 times. And then right at the very end, it might be like the single scull final in Rio, and 0.005 of a second separates 2 crews. Well, if you're doing 2,000 meter racing, then 80% of that effort is going to be aerobic. So that's always a good rule of thumb. So it just depends on how much volume you're going to have or not, and then be able to use your time well to make sure that you're getting in what it's going to take to achieve your racing. So that's a little bit general, but hopefully that.
Yeah. On that note, I don't know how. So I find it fascinating, and no doubt you do, with different sorts of training programs, and in terms of leading to particular results. So my understanding, and I don't know, but I think the female athletes have kind of hinted that when Andrew Randell came to be women's chief coach, that there was more competitive training, presumably at a higher intensity. And then you look at the model from the Netherlands with their PD Ilko Meerhorst, where they're doing these incredibly long distances at really low controlled intensity. I think Chris Korzanowski calls it a polarized program. How much are you influenced by anything like that, and what sort of program have you got your Australian athletes on now?
Yeah, good question. Good question all round, and that's why I come back to what's it take, and there's different ways to do it, and we were heavily influenced in Australia when Theo Kerner, who was the architect of the East German system, came out, especially with his training methodology. And that changed from a lot of interval training. And I remember Theo talking about when he first took over the East Germans, and they had to compete against the West Germans, who were doing a lot with, obviously there was great rivalry with Carl Adam and the interval training, and just being able to get your steady state, getting your steady state right. because that builds a lot of capillarization and a lot of aerobic capacity in your periphery, and then of course the intensity builds it in more in your central system. So basically you've got to juggle between the two of those, and then what you're talking about with Andy is also just that mindset about the side-by-side and the racing. So you have to again be developing people for that, for the environment they're going to be getting in, but it might also depend on the level of your athletes, because if you've got someone, a Helen Glover, she probably doesn't need to do as much side-by-side and racing work as somebody else who's still on the way up and learning, really how to push themselves. And I think, athletes get that. Catherine Granger was someone who's very good, about making sure your steady pace is steady and then going fast when you need to go fast,
Yeah. So you reference 2012, where I think the crews that you personally were responsible for, either as a performance director or coach, came second in the medal table, in terms of, what was it, 3 gold medals and 2 silvers.
Yeah.
What's your reflections looking back on there and your input into that success?
Look, it was it's a funny thing. You mentioned Andy Randall.
Yeah.
And I guess this is the influence of coaches. So I don't know if you ever ran into Peter Shakespeare, who was...
I remember Shakes.
And he did the world-class start. He was my and Ellen Randall's science teacher at Narrabundah College in Canberra. And so Ellen's on the team now. Andy's now the women's head coach in GB. We all rode together. And Andy, when he was 15, rode with a young Robin Williams, who was visiting his sister, who lives up the road and spending some time here. So Shakes was really able to inspire us to get into rowing, and we're still involved. And there was James Galloway, who was in the men's 8, the one in Nottingham. That year, he was part of that cohort as well. So what in that 2012 period, we had a real coaching team. We had Robin in there, Darren Wider, who's outstanding. We had Nick Strange, Paul Reedy, and what was really interesting, and this is a big reflection as well. So we had a really good, close-knit coaching team there to be able to deliver those results, and the success of the team was the success of the individual as well. So I think that worked really, really well. So it was a privilege to bring that together, plus all the support that we could bring around the coaches and the athletes for that. And of course, we had some outstanding athletes that had a few things to prove there at Dorney Lake.
Yeah. Talked about working with Catherine and Anna in the double. And I know Catherine's written in the book, and this is the kind of thing in terms of coaches of, I guess the question is how hard you push your athletes, and is that like you're pushing them too hard and that they feel unfairly pressed upon? And I'm guessing that in terms of coaches and athletes, and I think Mike Tatey talked about this, the way you deal with athletes now is different to the way you might have dealt with athletes, 20 years ago. And you've had experience of that. I mean, what is your experience and learning points?
Yeah, good question. Well, I've got a reputation for being reasonably hard, to be fair, to put that on the table. Look, with coaching, you can often see the potential in someone that they can't see themselves yet. So sometimes that's with a carrot, and sometimes that's with a with a stick, yeah. And I've always found that the athlete needs to feel that you're on their side, to be able to be pushing them in that way. And obviously wrong's wrong, and that's not somewhere to go. But in the nature of our sport, it's tough physically and it's tough mentally. So you have to get that balance between challenge and support, and that's for contemporary coaches. You can't have too much support and not enough challenge, because you won't go fast there. But if you've got too much challenge and not enough support, things will fall over. So it's about trying to get the balance of those two.
Yeah, I just had a thought. There must be. I wonder if you miss coaching now as a performance director, and that's. I don't know if you do coach. I guess you must go out with the crews. But how is it? What other skills do you use as a performance director managing coaches who are coaching crews, and how do you operate feedback and that sort of system with them?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. A really good two questions there. So I guess I felt like with that 2012 in myself personally, that I got to the stage where we could do that teamwork, and I felt I could offer more strategically and in a leadership way, and been really fortunate with UK Sport to do some outstanding professional development on that to help make a change, and sat on boards of NGBs, and used my spare time wisely to get a broader picture, which has really helped stick into this space, because you're a bit between the boardroom and the water in this role. And it's again like that challenge and support. You've got to be able to let the coaches coach, and you try and give them some guidance. A lot of the job here is to make sure people are working well together, and keeping that in line, and keeping the main thing as the main thing, to be fair.
And of course, one of the people you're working with now is a former athlete from the Australian team, not necessarily your athlete, but Sarah Cook, who's our colleague on the commentary team, and I know she's highly motivated to. I mean, she always talks about Australian crews anyway in the commentary. What is it like, you working with Sarah at this nitty-gritty time towards the end of this Olympic cycle?
Yeah, look, it's brilliant to have Sarah CEO. She brings a lot of drive, and she's not 40 yet, and which she'll remind you and I'm sure. And she's really driven to push the sport on, which is brilliant. And she's just sat in so many seats within our sport. So she's been an Olympic athlete. She's been a coach, a very successful coach. She's done a school training. She's been president of a rowing club. She's sat on the board of Rowing Australia, and she's been the chief operating officer of Australian Rowing as well. So she's got a really great understanding of the situation and what it is. So from a high performance sense, it's good that she completely understands what's required.
Are you going to go on till LA?
Well, I hope so. She has to ask yet. Look, we with Australian Rowing, and I guess we haven't got into that piece yet, but there was quite a sea change in 2017, moving to a centralised model. And our real strength in Australia is the programs in the states. Because we've got a proper program in each state to be able to feed athletes into 2 NTCs. So we've got our men's centre with HQ here in Canberra, and then 300 kilometres away in Penrith, just down the road from the Sydney Olympic course, is the Women's Centre.
Yeah.
We have a decentralised Paralympic program. So that centralisation model is something that's been a change. And, whilst it's been going for 7 years now, we need to make sure that keeps evolving and moving and giving us what we need to get as well. So there's still some unfinished business on where we'd like to get to. And obviously, with 2032 not terribly far away in Brisbane, we've got a good impetus to put things in place for the next 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking just before we went on air. Talk about long distance relationships. I know your wife is here in GB, and you've got your kids out there with you. And I know you do come back to GB because David Tanner tells me, I just saw Paul Thompson. How do you make that work?
Yeah, look, that's a good question, and really lucky to have a supportive family. Alison, my wife, she's a professor in a medical school at Imperial College in London, so she's got her own career and aspirations to do that, and we're both supportive of each other. So we just make it work. Being on the Australian team, I'll be in Europe for 4.5 months this year. Yeah. By the time we go through the Olympics, the Paralympics, and the beach sprints, and there's just not the time to come to and fro, so I'm able to get some balance there. And Alison comes out here for a bit as well. So we make it work, and eventually we'll have a point where we're staying under the one roof a little bit more often. But we've still got things to achieve before then.
Yeah. I don't know if the Run Australia has announced which World Cups the team's going to compete at, but I imagine you're going to come into World Cup 2 for Lucerne first.
Yeah, we'll be coming in. We'll have the crews come for the qualification regatta, World Cup 2, and we'll go to World Cup 3 as well. And this is the bandwagon now that I'm back in the Southern Hemisphere. Just about the World Rowing calendar having a bit more. We need to have a bit of a look at all our events. We've been inputting into the event review that's happening with World Rowing at the moment. Yeah. Where the European Championships fit, because that ends up having a roll-on effect. The men's team, which probably didn't help too much, maybe was over for 13 weeks last year, and just where that the time between the last World Cup and the World Championships is whether you can come home, whether you got the money to come home and go back, or whether you stay over. It's really a piece that we need to get. So this year, from what we've heard, a lot of the European nations are going to go to the European Championships. Lucerne and World Cup 2 will be big, but there's not going to be so many big teams anyway at World Cup 3, which of course is ideal for those out of Europe to be able to come to and then go on to the Olympics.
Yeah, that must be a pain in the arse, really.
Yeah, it is. So not quite sure of the solution, but that's what we get to work around, and we make the most of it. And we've toyed with the idea for a few years about having a Pan-Pacific regatta. Getting Canada, New Zealand, Australia, US, China, some of those bigger nations to try and do something in another part of the world. But I think if we really want to be a truly global sport, which we should be, we need to have a look at that and see where we can go.
Yeah. We talked about Megan and Kate, your first pair that won gold in 95 and the Olympic gold in 96. Is there ever anything that beats that feeling as a coach of coaching a crew to your first Olympic gold?
Yeah, look, that was a fabulous experience. Kate and Megan were the first Australian women to win an Olympic gold medal, and cemented their place in our sport. But that was, learned a lot of lessons there, because in 1995 we were in a lot of trouble. The team only won 2 medals. And then there was a big turnover in the administration of the sport, and and that was really honed down to Ronald Barchi was head coach, and a
Yeah.
few people to pull it all together. And Australia topped the medal table in 1996. It's the last time they've done it. So 2 golds, a silver, and 3 bronze. And the Saturday of that regatta, with the awesome foursome, Kate and Megan, Rob Scott came second to Steve and Matt.
Yeah.
I think we had another medal there. It's still been the most successful day at an Olympic regatta. And there's, when you talk about things to remember, that was the night after the bombing, the Centennial Park bombing. So we were woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and with a direct bomb threat against us. We were staying outside the village in the university in Gainesville. So we're all piled out, and this is on the morning of the finals. So we're all piled out out on the field, and Kate Slatter has decided not to bring out with her a racing kit for the day. So Muggins here has to, everybody's getting evacuated, and I'm going the other way, thinking, trust me, I'm going to get blown up and killed coming back for a damn rowing suit. We got out of that, and then quickly it started to go. Okay, well, what do we need to do now to get ready for the racing? And we had a day house, so we all got together and worked out what the plan was and what have you, and we've all come down there and prioritised it and got everyone ready and gone off and done the racing, and had a fabulous regatta, a fabulous day across the whole regatta there. And anyway, at the end, you come in and they do the press piece and the press conference, and as and then afterwards they're talking. And one of the and what we decided, we didn't, whether rightly or wrongly, we wanted to keep it quiet and not let it get into the press, because we didn't want the Olympic Committee to say, right, everybody's got to go back to the village when we've still got crews to race the next day. So it was going to be mum's word. So it was one of the journalists, Alex Brown from the Sydney Morning Herald, came up and said, well done, and did the usual stuff. And then he said, well, you must have had to get out of bed early this morning, Paul. And, so I go into saying something but nothing about, it's like the other day and all that sort of stuff. And, he let me go on and on and on. And then he came back to it and he said, but you really must have had to get out of bed early in the morning. What are you talking about? And he said, well, look down. So in this pitch black when we kicked out, I have one Adidas shoe on my left, an Asics shoe on my right. So, quite a memorable anyway.
I think maybe one of the most remarkable bits of coaching that you did, because I've talked to Vicky Thornley and Kath Granger about this, was that silver medal in Rio. I kind of call it an unlikely silver medal in Rio. They nearly won gold. What do you remember about that journey coaching those two women? Because they weren't firing at all in the season.
So and there was a lot played out in the press around that as well, to be fair. Look, Catherine had 2 seasons off, and Vicky had come through in the single, and we and Anna Watkins had come back in to see whether she would be part of the mix for Rio as well. And we went on some camps, and we had the 8 with James Harris trundling along and getting better. And early on in February, I think it was, we'd already identified that they were going to be the double, so it wasn't a selection-y thing, and struggled to find their feet. And we went to the European Championships in
Brandenburg,
and it was like the North Sea.
And
we went quite well in the heats and through to the final, and then basically sank there. And then in the wash up of that, it became obvious they didn't have confidence in the double, even though we did. And so that was a really and that is the most challenging time I've had as a coach, no doubt.
Wow.
And so, what do we do? So we went off to Lucerne, and the 8 raced, and they were really challenging the Americans. They got a silver medal there, and they wanted to get left alone. But what we said is we wanted to put our best foot forward. So we actually went back and did some seat racing. And I took myself off the watch. James Harris came off the watch, so we had independent people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the first time I'd ever had to tell Catherine that she'd lost a seat race.
Wow.
So both of them lost, and by less than a second. So it was a close margin. So the 8 went on, and basically it was like, well, okay, do you want to do the double? That's what we've got. And so there's a bit of soul searching around about how that could come together. And to be fair, that was 50 days before the Olympics. And huge respect for both of them, and Vicky and Catherine just absolutely gripped it, and just every day was better than the last one, better than the last one, better than the last one. And we had some great training camps there. And then they headed off, and I thought they were going to do it that time as well, which would have been a fairy tale finish. So look, that was really interesting. Just how things came together there.
Yeah, I understand. Coaches, when asked who's the best athlete you've ever coached, prevaricate, and they don't want to say because they coach lots of great athletes. So I'll ask you, how close does Catherine Granger come to being the best athlete you've ever coached?
Very, very good. Sadly, I haven't coached you, Crossy. Otherwise, look, I'll do the same and shuffle around. But someone like Catherine, there's so many of them. Someone like Catherine is just the most complete package that you can get. Complete feel, fierce competitor, a real engine, and her ability to be able to get other people in the boat to row well. And I think when the real champions there get people in, and Helen Glover's fabulous at that as well. And if you talk to Jürgen, well, when I was talking to Jürgen, he said, like, Andy Hodge is just able to go, thanks, coach. That's the best thing you could do. And Catherine's really got that. And someone like Anna, and that's why those two were really good mix, because Anna is just so analytical. Super smart. And just when you got that great mix between that analytical side, but then the passion and the teamwork side, that was and the confidence that Catherine can bring, that was a great combination. But look, there's been so many of them there in so many different ways, and it's and that's the great thing about our sport. It's not just one box. People their own personality and their own strengths to be able to get there.
I guess one of the things facing teams, maybe an issue with the British team post Rio, was the ability to retain athletes for the next Olympiad, because a lot of the mid-20s athletes like Laludis or Paul Bennett from the 8, they didn't throw their hat in the ring for Tokyo. What's the situation with the Australian team this year, and the likely of who might go forward to LA?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, and I probably should have got the plug in earlier. We're absolutely privileged, and it's transformational that we've got Hancock Prospecting, that's led by our patron Gina Reinhardt.
Yeah.
And she invests heavily in the athletes. She's a huge champion for Australian sports people, especially Australian sports women. And through that, we're able to support our rowers, similar to what Siemens did in the UK. And so having that support is instrumental in being able to extend people's careers and be able to, balance. We've got two athlete wellbeing and education managers that work in both centres to make sure that people athletes are developing off the water just as much as they're on the water. So with the combination of that, we saw a good retention between Tokyo for Paris, and got our fingers crossed. But we'll see where we get to after Paris, and of course, success doing all that counts as well.
Yeah. Just on a different topic, and I did promise I'd ask you this. Colin Greenway, who you might know, he was one of the GB junior coaches. He runs the rowing setup at Hampton School, and he showed me this thing about, was it one of the Melbourne clubs, maybe Merck's, that sort of said, come to Merck's because the rule change in the Princess Elizabeth Cup at Henley for junior eights.
And I think that might be Melbourne Uni, not Mercantile.
Melbourne Uni, sorry. Yeah, Melbourne Uni. Yeah, okay, thanks for that. What's your take on that? And has that got anywhere? Are they going to come over with a Mega 8 to try and win the Princess Elizabeth for boys' 8s? Or indeed for girls' 8s too?
Yeah, look, good question. Firstly, we shouldn't underestimate, the traditions in our sport and how important they are. And as much as we're looking forward, we need to recognise what's come past and what a fabulous draw and event that Henley Royal Regatta is, globally as much as it is in the UK. And that's a real motivation for clubs to get over there. So that's really good. They've been particularly enthusiastic, but the stewards work in weird and wonderful ways, Martin. And as you know, one of your co-commentators and my CEO is one of them as well. So I think there's been discussions had, and they're reassessing their strategy there.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, nothing to do with being involved with Sydney University Boat Club at all.
Yeah, maybe she sent Volpe out to do that.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, Paul, it's been amazing. I know you've got Izzy Day, who is watching. Hi from rowing Western Australia. Yeah.
Hi, Izzy.
Yeah. So I just wonder if there's anything we haven't touched on, Paul, that you'd like to say or talk about. I know you've got somewhere to go now.
Yeah, no, look, that's okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground there. I hope someone found it, or people found it interesting, and maybe got something out of it. But I've had such a fabulous ride and journey. I managed to avoid a real job for many years, and been able to meet some fabulous people like yourself, Martin, and work with some outstanding athletes, which is the bit that really keeps you going.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll end the live part of this interview there. You've been amazing, Paul. You've ranged over lots of things. You've fronted up on the questions. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
It's been great.
Thank you.